Yes, sir. You just found it. In a course with you. Let's chat. Welcome to the Intercourse Show. I am your host, Mr. B. Today we have a very exciting show for you. Today we are discussing the explosive interview that took place between President Trump and the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky. For those of you who haven't been following along, there was a big blow up recently. I believe it took place on Friday when Zelensky came in town to sign a minerals deal with Trump. Trump believes that the U.S. has invested over $350 billion through Biden to help Zelensky fund the war that he has against Russia. And unfortunately, the European counterparts, who's also supporting Zelensky, have only funded about a third of that at about $100 billion. Now, the difference between how those funding was processed is that Europe set it up as a loan, which means they intend to leverage Zelensky's minerals and other services to pay them back for the money that they're lending them to fund the war. Meanwhile, Biden was essentially just giving the money away for free with no requirements of paying it back. Now, Trump, who isn't necessarily a big war hawk, doesn't see why the U.S. should, A, be funding this war at a far greater rate than the European counterparts who essentially are the ones threatened by Russia's aggression. So Trump has taken a position that Zelensky is, a dictator, or he provoked the war, and he sets a few things to kind of get everybody to the table, because one of his campaign promises was to bring peace to the random wars going on around the world. And so Zelensky, after some weeks of negotiation, agreed to come do a signing of the minerals deal at the White House this past Friday. And unfortunately, it didn't go too well. Now, a lot of controversy about how Zelensky was treated, whether or not he got a fair shot, whether or not he was ambushed. Trump's critics would say that Zelensky was ambushed and that they planned to embarrass him and make a fool of him, while others who look at it a bit more objectively says that Zelensky was a bit rude and pompous in the ways that he spoke to the president of the free world, and that he essentially kind of, allowed things to go way left by the tone and the disrespect and the fact that he didn't say sorry, and the condescending nature in which he was talking and kind of rebuffing J.D. Vance, the vice president, as well as Donald Trump. Now, I have a great video that I believe Megyn Kelly did that kind of outlines the provocation points for Zelensky and why Trump may have felt the need to step in and interject. And ultimately, it resulted in the Trump crew kicking Zelensky out of the office, out of the White House. He didn't get a chance to even eat the lunch that they had prepared for him, and they canceled the press conference. Now, what happened thereafter was Zelensky flew to Europe, and then going to Europe, he was welcomed like a hero, which is another point that I would like to weigh in on. How is it in one instance, Europe says they need the backing of the president, but in the same breath, they undermine him when he's challenged and disrespected by the man who needs him to help get the war sorted out? It sends mixed messaging. It's almost like if you have two parents and they're divorced, and one parent says you can do one thing and another parent enables you to do it while the other one says you can't. Now you're in a situation where you're playing both parents based on whoever's going to agree with you. And the fact that the U.S. and Europe are not on the same page, some people are giving Zelensky assurance and propping him up to be disrespectful, and others are telling him to be humble so that he can actually get the help from the bigger parent who's funding the war. There's the mixed messaging going on. So there's some thoughts that I'll add after I play the clip, but I think it's important to kind of bring things into context. Megyn Kelly did a great piece, and I'd like to share that in this episode. So let's go.
It had the feelings at times, Dana, of an ambush. It seemed as though, Vladimir Putin's work was being done for him.
It was a planned ambush designed to embarrass President Zelensky in order to benefit Vladimir Putin.
I think there's no question that this was a setup. This was a setup for the cameras to try to humiliate Zelensky.
Welcome back to the Megyn Kelly Show. There you heard media and Democratic leaders continuing and repeatedly calling Friday's blow-up at the White House an ambush of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky by President Trump and Vice President Vance. We will be hearing about the fallout from this meeting for a very long time. Okay, but the widely shared clips online do not tell the whole story of what actually happened in that meeting. We were all together when this broke. Remember, we had the gals from Red Scare on. We just got long clips. And now I've watched the whole thing, and maybe you have too. But I'll tell you, if you haven't watched the whole thing, you haven't seen the proper parts highlighted by the mainstream media, including Zelensky's antagonism and true open disrespect, and the Democrats' apparent attempt to sabotage the meeting just prior to it, which they've been openly bragging about, but now that they just want to blame it all on Trump, are trying to say has been totally misrepresented. No, we didn't do anything. You, Chris Murphy, you're a villain and you're a liar. And we'll get into it. Most news programs you're going to listen to have neither the time nor the desire to walk their audiences through the critical moments that happened before the viral showdown. But we do. And we would like all of you to fully understand what took place in total. This thing lasted 49 minutes. President Trump started the meeting complimenting President Zelensky and the Ukrainian soldiers.
Your soldiers have been unbelievably brave. We've given them great equipment, but somebody has to use the equipment. They've been unbelievably brave. This was supposed to be over very quickly, and here we are 3 years later. So I give tremendous credit to your generals and your soldiers and yourself.
It was very gracious of the president. He told Mr. Zelensky it was an honor to have him in the Oval Office. Trump's doing the right thing there. He's glad-handing. He's paying him compliments. He's showing him respect. Mr. Zelensky, in return, thanked President Trump for the invitation and said he hoped the minerals deal would be the first step to real security guarantees. He then took out a series of photos to show President Trump. They pictured Ukrainian prisoners of war held in Russian captivity. It was Mr. Zelensky's way of saying to President Trump, this is who you are dealing with. President Trump looked at the photos, expressed sympathy, and said that's why we need this war to end. Contrary to what critics will have you believe, it was President Zelensky who publicly challenged President Trump in his face first, several times, in fact, in front of the cameras. Mr. Trump repeatedly kept his cool. Mr. Zelensky openly disagreed with the president when talking about Europe's contributions to the war. Watch.
Europe really helped. President Trump said that they made less support, but they're our friends and they are our very supportive partners. They really gave a lot, Mr. President. They did.
They gave a lot, but they gave much less.
No.
Much less.
No. 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 Okay.
You can see they had a little disagreement. For the listening audience, they both leaned in on their point, and Trump sort of jokingly, warmly, in a friendly manner, kind of touched Zelensky's arm like, oh, I kind of agree to disagree. It was good. It was a nice moment. They laughed it off and they kept going. A few minutes later, President Zelensky again publicly challenged Mr. Trump over his assertion that Russian President Vladimir Putin never broke a deal with Ukraine during Trump's first term in office.
25 times he broke a ceasefire.
But he never broke to me. He never broke to me.
No, you were the president. You were the president during.
He never broke to me.
In 2016, you've been the president, Mr. President. You've been the president, but he had, of course, not with you, but he had during those periods, he had conversations with our side. And we had Normandy format, the France, Germany, Ukraine, and Russia. And he broken 25 times. That's why we will never accept just ceasefire. It will not work without security guarantees. Security guarantees, maybe President is right about this document and other, but this document is not enough.
President Zelensky spoke for several minutes on this topic, making his case for why he does not trust President Putin. President Trump did not interrupt him once. It happened one more time before the big blow up. And let's be honest, every diplomat knows there is risk in doing this to another world leader. And in particular, if that leader is Donald Trump. He does not like to be confronted in this manner. And that's completely acceptable and normal. Look at how Benjamin Netanyahu handled the time with Joe Biden. You don't think he wanted to punch Joe Biden in the face many times when he came to visit the White House over what he was saying? But he handled himself with charm, with respect, with dignity, and never openly antagonized the guy from whom he was asking so much. Okay, so Zelensky went at it again, having already gotten away with this a couple of times. He decided to press his luck. This time, he even went so far as to accuse President Trump of getting his information in the form of propaganda directly from President Putin.
A lot of cities have been.
This is a fair point that she's raised. In the political world, there is a such thing as decorum, charm, diplomacy. And my observation of President Zelensky is that he's not very tactful in terms of how he presents himself. I don't believe he does a great job of reading the room. Now, I do understand that he is a wartime president in this point in time, but his assurances came from a prior administration, the Joe Biden administration, who themselves wanted conflict between the U.S., NATO, and Russia. Trump is this business guy who doesn't put wars on the top of his agenda. He's an America First president. So really and truly, he's reluctantly dealing with this issue because he feels like it was one of the messes that Joe Biden left for him to clean up. So Trump is not exactly excited about the prospect of continuing a war that he didn't allow to start. The one thing Donald Trump has constantly reiterated is the fact that this war would have never happened had he been in office. And Donald Trump is particularly sensitive around the fact that he felt in 2020 the election was stolen from him. So, and he was impeached in part due to a call that he had with Zelensky. This relationship is very, very, very sensitive. And Zelensky is not the type of guy who seems to have the ability to read the room, to understand his audience. Zelensky, in my view, is grandstanding in a way that makes him appear bigger than he is. He's actually losing the war. Russia is demolishing them. They don't have funding. They don't have enough men. Which is why Trump keeps telling him, you don't have the cards. You're at a disadvantage. Us stepping in is to salvage your and limit your losses. You're not able to negotiate from a place as if this war has been fought like on an equal basis. Russia has the upper hand here, whether you choose to acknowledge that or not. They are advancing. They've already captured 20% of your land, the 20% that has most of the minerals, and they're continuing to press upon you. They're bigger than you. They have more weapons. They have more people. They have more technology, and they're willing to grind you out until they destroy you. So you are at a disadvantage. Now, Zelensky, to her point, is not as tactful as some of the NATO counterparts are. Prior to this meeting taking place, the president of France came. He was tactful in his quest to kind of bring Trump on board in support of Ukraine. The president of the United Kingdom came. He too was tactful, a bit more diplomatic, charming. He was able to deal with the environment that they already know does not have an appetite for prolonging a war and funding that war. Zelensky almost comes with this pompous attitude as if he's entitled to more money from the US, and that he's going to somehow shame or guilt or pressure Donald Trump into supporting him to bolster his image in the world's view and minimize Donald Trump, which is already a losing tactic, because this is a man that some would say is very egotistical. He does not like to look bad. And for you to come into his home, grandstand him, and make him look lesser when you're the one who needs his help is just bad optics. It's bad for business, which is why you will see the ambassador from his country had her hand buried in her face, because she understood that Zelensky did a horrible job at conveying this point. Now, in this next segment, she will continue to outline all the different ways that he was triggering and poking the bear, but there's also more details as to potentially why Zelensky chose to take this approach. Megyn believes that based on the fact he met with Trump's enemies, the Democratic Party, prior to going into the meeting, they put a battery in his back to get him to be pompous and to puff himself up, to challenge Trump at his detriment. And again, it shows that he's not really a leader who's smart or who really even reads the optics well, right? He's taking bad advice from people who themselves have agendas, who hate Trump for whatever their reasons are. He's not even able to read the room to see, well, why would the Democrats try to make me feel like I need to challenge the guy I need help from? He's not there. He's not even capturing that part of it. But he continues to dig himself a hole. Let's continue.
Been destroyed. There are a lot of cities that are not recognizable. There's not a building standing.
No.
And a lot of things.
Mr. President, you have to come and to look. No. We have very good cities. Yes, a lot of things been destroyed, but mostly cities alive. Ukraine is fighting and Ukraine lives. This is very important. And maybe it's Putin is sharing this information that he destroyed us.
Bad move.
What's that? So he interrupts President Trump as he's speaking and then says he's wrong, only to then admit that Trump is right. There has been a lot of destruction, but there are cities that are still intact. Well, Trump didn't dispute that. What's he doing? He's poking the bear over and over. Why would you do that to somebody whose support you must have, you desperately need? Why was he in there antagonizing Trump? I mean, in particular, this would be antagonistic to any of us, but in particular to President Trump, and he knows that, as do all world leaders. It is what it is. Deal with it. But once again, President Trump let the comment slide. He was staying above it. He did not engage, though he was being directly challenged publicly. President Trump even said at one point, quote, "We haven't committed, but could conceivably," end quote, commit U.S. troops to Ukraine after a peace deal is reached. That was a huge moment and could have been a huge win for President Zelensky to take home, because Trump has said exactly the opposite thus far, but he did not take the W. Aside from his vocal criticism and interruptions and challenges of President Trump before the open argument that we all saw, Mr. Zelensky's body language also caught the attention of many observers. When President Trump was talking about not wanting any more death on either side, Mr. Zelensky raised his eyebrows and sighed.
We have tremendous death taking place as we speak, and I don't want to have that. Think of the parents, whether they're in Russia or Ukraine, think of the parents of all these people being killed needlessly.
They came to our territory.
Should have never started. If I were president, this would have never started.
He also shook his head, shrugged, sighed, and rolled his eyes several more times while President Trump was making his points. Watch.
I don't think you're going to need much security. I think once this deal gets done, it's over. Russia's not going to want to go back, and nobody's going to want to go back.
And who would protect
Shaking
those
his head.
minerals if they are U.S. interests? Would that be Ukrainian
They'll be
forces?
protected. The
European
agreement
forces,
will protect them.
U.S.
The
forces?
agreement, yeah, we're signing an agreement. You know?
Right, but what if
Brings
Russia
that
tries
rise.
to invade or there's Russian aggression in response?
I just told you, I don't think that's going to happen. And if that were going to happen, I wouldn't make a deal. If I thought that was going to happen, I
Head
wouldn't make
shakes
a deal.
eye. Okay. If you don't think there's been other world leaders in the Oval with this president or are others who wanted to shake their heads no while our president was making a point, they didn't agree at all, who wanted to say they attacked us. You don't think Netanyahu would have liked to have said that to Biden? They attacked us. They attacked us in the middle of his remarks. Yes, but there's a diplomatic way of handling this. And instead, the left would just like to blame Donald Trump. They don't want to acknowledge any of these minor and then cumulative, serious.
This is a great point. Recently, I'm not sure how much you guys follow this, but recently Trump had Netanyahu in the Oval Office with him. And he said some outlandish things about how the U.S. is going to occupy Gaza. And Netanyahu was shocked because that's obviously what he wants. Then, like a few days later, the president of Jordan, who himself is a Muslim leader, also a neighbor of Israel and the Palestinians in Gaza, was meeting with Trump in the Oval Office, and Trump again alluded to this point of Jordan taking in some, if not all, of the 2 million displaced Palestinians so that they can demolish Gaza and build it and create it to be this, this Riviera, if you will. And you can clearly see during that meeting with the King of Jordan how uncomfortable the man was. And he could have clearly challenged Trump and said, there's absolutely no way that I could ever support your suggestion. Instead, he didn't challenge him. He said, we will do our part and take in a few people who I believe had cancer, some kids and things of that nature. I think it was about 2,000 he offered to take. And then he said, we'll have discussions with our, peers, Islamic countries who you have, brought into the fold to discuss what's feasible. Now, it's clear and evident. There's no way the king is going to say, yes, Trump, create a situation where you're displacing people from their homeland. Like, he felt like there's no way he could sign off on that. But the man respectfully sat there and tactfully worked around the situation. Now, I'm sure behind closed doors, he had an open and candid conversation with Trump. But what Megyn's point is, a lot of other leaders of other countries and nations know that it's not wise to go into someone's place and in the open sphere, in the open public, with cameras turned on, challenge them in a way to make them look small. Challenge them to make them seem like they're not getting their information from the right places. Try to challenge them saying that, oh, you got the information from Russia. Because that was a tactic used by his political opponents when they tried to make him seem like an illegitimate president, like he cheated, like he was all displaced. And all of that has been debunked over 8 years of litigation in battles. For him to say that says he does not pay attention to the sensitivity of the things that would matter to that leader, right? To say to a president, oh, that must be Russian disinformation, would imply that he's somehow a Russian agent who takes his talking points from Russia. And that's a sensitive topic for him, which is one of the things that Trump went on to defend Russia, saying we could have been in World War III had this leader taken the tactics of my enemy seriously into heart. We could be in a fight right now. I'm actually grateful for the fact that this guy was not emotionally moved, and he was able to be an adult and not get riled up by the lies that was being used by my political enemy. This guy goes and uses that very sensitive topic to somehow persuade the guy he needs help from. Zelensky is not a good political operative. He's a guy, I think he was a comedian who was propped up into the position because I don't think he's all the way there. And he can just be told what to do. And he's just a figurehead, if you will, for the NATO organization, who themselves want to infringe on the neutral zone that was predetermined between the U.S. and Russia during the Cold War. And which is why Trump would say that there's a provocation there, because all of this started when Zelensky said he wanted to be a part of NATO, right? So, and Russia said that's a red line that can't be crossed. So, you can see where things go left. I just wanted to interject and add that because I felt like that was a really, really good point.
Provocations and antagonistic behaviors. These were just the gestures that we saw when Zelensky was on camera. We didn't see the whole, we didn't see anything that happened when he was off cam. There very well may have been more that Vice President Vance and other officials in that room witnessed. And when the big blow up happened, Mr. Zelensky also addressed in that critical moment as the tension was building, Vice President Vance using only his first name, saying, "What kind of diplomacy, JD, are you speaking about?" It was an informality that could be used in a warmer moment, like JD and I had lunch and really made a lot of progress. That wouldn't be totally out of line. But in a moment that is tense and in which you can feel there's an argumentative dynamic, you don't address the sitting American vice president as JD. It felt disrespectful to a lot of Americans. And then came the moment seen around the world.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are
Mr.
not
President,
strong...
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come to the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know.
See, I have to interject here. This point, I feel like, was the biggest point made. That was Zelensky being sarcastic. Because Trump's always say, why are we funding this? We have a big, beautiful ocean in between us and Russia. We're not threatened by what Russia is doing in Europe. We have a big, beautiful ocean. We have a relationship with NATO, but why are we funding a war when they're the one that feels threatened? Why are we paying more than them? Why are they not at least paying the same amount as we're paying? We have a big, beautiful ocean. Trump constantly reiterates this in a ton of speeches that he's had prior to this meeting. When Zelensky says this statement here, and he said it a couple times throughout the whole meeting, he was taking a jab at Donald Trump. You have a big, beautiful ocean. You won't feel it. But you'll feel it because even your big, beautiful ocean can't protect you. And if you don't put your faith and confidence in us and give us the money that we need to stand there and protect you, then you'll have to stand up for yourself. And I'm sure you don't want to do that. And Trump's like, wait, aren't you the guy who's losing the war? Aren't you the guy who needs us to help you? Aren't you the guy who's getting destroyed, who don't have enough men to actually even fight? You don't have the equipment. You're the small fry in this whole thing. Aren't you the guy begging me for a favor? Who are you to tell me that I'm going to regret not supporting you? He doesn't understand the tone of what he's saying. And I don't know if that's a language barrier with Zelensky, but I think it was said quite intentionally. there was an air of sarcasm, to Megyn's point, antagonism in there, where he was essentially slapping Trump and saying, "You're a big, beautiful ocean. You have a big, beautiful ocean that separates you between Russia, but don't rely on that for long, because after Russia's done with us, they're coming for you next. So buyer beware."
God bless.
You don't know
God
that.
bless. You
Don't-
will not
you
have
gotta-
a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
No
You're in
dictate-
no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
you
We're
will-
going to feel very
you will
good.
feel influence.
We're going to feel
I'm-
very
I'm
good and
telling
very
you,
strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position.
You think
You're gambling with World War
What you-
III.
what you
You're
speaking
gambling
about?
with
What you
World
speaking
War
about?
III. And
You-
what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country.
I'm
It's
with
back
all
to you.
respect to you.
Far more than a lot of people said
I'm wearing
they
respect.
should have.
Have you said thank you once?
A lot
entire
of
meeting?
times.
No, in this
Even
entire meeting,
today.
have you said thank
Even
you?
today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for
What-
the United
what
States
you're
of
speaking
America
about?
and the president who's trying to save your country.
We are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
You haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet,
You
and
haven't
not
been
only
alone.
in this
We
cabinet.
gave you, through
I
this
said
stupid president, $350 billion.
You voted
We gave
for
you
your
military equipment.
You
And you
voted
men
for
are
your
brave,
president.
but they had to use our military.
What about
If you didn't have
You
our
invited
military
me.
equipment,
You invited
if
me
you
to
didn't
speak.
have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3
okay?
days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days, this is something
Maybe
new.
less.
In 2 weeks, of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business. That was with Obama, who gave you sheets. And
This guy is extremely rude and disrespectful. I watched the whole thing. I don't know. He rubbed me the wrong way. He's talking in a flippant manner. He needs the favor. You know what I'm saying? He's not talking like somebody who, needs a favor. He's talking very disrespectfully, and I think it's because, he was put up to act like that.
I gave you javelins.
Yes.
I gave you the javelins to take out all those tanks. Obama gave you sheets. In fact, the statement is Obama gave sheets and Trump gave javelins. You got to be more thankful, because let me tell you, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards.
It's so interesting because Trump held his fire until Zelensky suggested that the United States was under threat. And Trump was not going to let Americans sit at home and be told by the Ukrainian leader that we were next. And honestly, that's when Big Daddy got in there and he was like, oh no, now it's on. That's when Trump got mad. You could feel it. Zelensky said there, you don't feel it now, but you will feel it in the future. And Trump was like, you don't tell us that. You're in no position.
Did she just call him Big Daddy? This lady and Trump has had an interesting back and forth. She's now referring to him as Big Daddy. Okay, Megyn.
To be speaking to that, none whatsoever. And then you have the nerve of Zelensky when Trump eventually starts interrupting him back, going, you invited me here to speak. What? What? He sat there, he let you interrupt him repeatedly. Only when you suggested America is going to come under threat did Trump stand up and say, now I'm drawing the line. Now you're done. Now I am going to do the talking. So why would Mr. Zelensky travel all the way to Washington to go to the White House and try to publicly own the leader of the free world? Right? Like, why? Why would he have handled it this way? Well, perhaps we need look no further than the Democratic senators with whom Mr. Zelensky met before he went to the White House. And I mean within the hour. Take a listen to Arizona Senator Mark Kelly talk about what he told Zelensky within the hour of that meeting we just witnessed in the White House.
Hey, folks, just met with President Zelensky a little while ago, told him how I feel the American people are really behind him in this struggle, and Russia brutally invaded Ukraine, and Putin is a war criminal, should be in prison. I also told him I'm a little uncomfortable that this is now appears to be like sort of a business transaction, but the same time, Zelensky needs to do what is in the best interest of his country and his people.
Okay, so that doesn't sound very positive about the deal, does it? I'm uncomfortable. It's been reduced to a business transaction. Just a little needling. I'm uncomfortable, and we're all on your side, and Putin should be in jail, and you should do what's in the best interest of the Ukrainian people. Democratic Senator of Connecticut, Chris Murphy, too, posted on X. Now, keep in mind, he did this at 11:15 on Friday morning before the meeting and before the blow up. He was so proud of himself. He posted on X Friday morning, quote, just finished meeting with President Zelensky. He confirmed that the Ukrainian people will not support a fake peace agreement where Putin gets everything he wants and there are no security arrangements for Ukraine. You see what he did. His post accompanied a picture of Zelensky at a conference table with, who's that across from him? It's Senator Murphy, who's right across from him. This was within 1 hour of Zelensky's White House meeting, as I said. As I pointed out on X yesterday, it would appear that here's what happened. The Democrats bashed the two-phase deal Trump was arranging of 1, a financial agreement, and then 2, a ceasefire deal as, quote, a fake peace agreement with, quote, no security arrangements to Mr. Zelensky right before he went to the White House. It's fake. There's no security arrangements. It's a business deal. I'm uncomfortable with it. I want assurances, I guess, in Chris Murphy's case, that the people that you're not going to sign it. And then he went to the White House to sign what was clearly phase 1. No, it wasn't the ultimate ceasefire. It wasn't the security arrangement deal. It was the first part of it, which was the minerals deal, which is the thing that Trump has been saying all along will be, in essence, a form of U.S. security, because if we're investing hundreds of billions of dollars trying to extract these raw earth materials from Ukraine, his theory is that Vladimir Putin will not mess with Ukraine. He'll be messing with our interests. And then when it comes to boots on the ground, the Europeans are going to speak to that in phase 2 of this deal. But it was shat all over by Chris Murphy and others. And then when President Trump and his vice president, J.D. Vance, called out his grandstanding and disrespect, Zelensky's, all hell broke loose. And the Democrats now, that it devolved to a fight, have reverted to their tried and true accusation that Trump is no more than Putin's puppet, that this whole thing was an ambush by Trump of Zelensky because he wants to do the bidding of Vladimir Putin. And here's one other thing. So Chris Murphy today is very upset. I bet he wishes he hadn't sent out that tweet. He didn't know it was going to happen, and that he would later see it as a great way to blame Trump for being a Putin puppet again, who sabotaged poor Zelensky. You see, the problem is he already had gone on record as saying what he said in that tweet we just put up. And now he's all over X trying to do one of these, walking back. He claims he's now the victim of a MAGA smear. Over the last 24 hours, MAGA has been ceaselessly spreading the claim that Democrats, from Susan Rice to Tony Blinken to me, pushed Zelensky to reject the minerals deal. Total lie, made up out of thin air, zero sources. A short lesson in how these lies spread in MAGA world. Not entirely clear where it started, but the source looks like it might be from a totally random MAGA user who says she is just speculating that Blinken, Rice, Nuland, and Vindman had a conference call with Zelensky, just a MAGA troll making up shit in their basement. I don't know anything about that. I know what you tweeted, though, sir. Another source seems to be this New York Post columnist who wildly twists my post about Zelensky's well-known opposition to a bad ceasefire deal into a claim that Democrats advised him to reject the mineral deal. Totally false, zero regard for tactics. You made clear, though, sir, you made clear that you got him to confirm to you that the Ukrainian people will not support a fake peace agreement where Putin gets everything he wants and there are no security arrangements for Ukraine. He's pretending in that post that what was supposed to happen this past Friday was not part of it. It was very clearly phase 1. It was the most the United States is willing to do.
I think with this, it's clear and evident to see that there is some fair points raised by Megyn Kelly. It is plausible to believe that the Democrats who were willing to lie about Trump being a Russian agent when he won his first election, who try to impeach him 2 times, who's been calling him a Russian puppet, would pull Zelensky, the guy they've been supporting prior to losing this election, aside and say, don't give Trump this win. Make him look bad. Don't sign off on a deal. It's not a deal that helps you. I actually do believe that there's some credibility to that assertion that they met with him before, pretty much charged him up, and threw him in the ring to be boastful and disrespectful to their host. 100% believe that. And I think that's exactly what happened here. Obviously, people can draw their own conclusions, but I think that's exactly the case, because immediately thereafter, the Democrats and some of these liberal news channels have taken the narrative that Trump's a bully and he pushed them aside and he did this, because the whole point is about making Trump look bad for their political gain, to add credence to their assertion that Trump is an amateur, that Trump don't know what he's doing, that Trump is not effective as a leader. And it's just a way of staining Trump, who essentially mollywopped him in the last election. Well, that is my opinion. I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of the Intercourse Show. Feel free to weigh in and share your thoughts and opinions down below through the comment section. If you're not connected, I ask that you like and subscribe and you lend your voice to the conversation. Signing off, yours truly, Mr. B.